A reaction now from our Fox Biz All-Stars, including Heath Manning and Richard Benjamin and Steve Moore. Steve, obviously, you know, the angst builds when it looks like ISIS is just sort of running roughshod here. But of course, they have the advantage of playing off of these videos and playing off of our fears and being like a needle in a haystack to find. What do we do?
Well, you know, Neil, I'm a big believer that when you're strong, when you're weak at home, you're weak abroad, and when you're strong at home, you're strong abroad. That was a lesson that Reagan taught us in the 1980s.
Well, I don't know, though. I mean, Danny Pearl of the Wall Street Journal was still brutally beheaded in the midst of what we were told was an aggressive campaign against al-Qaeda and the Taliban to little avail.
Well, that's true. I just think that what's happened, not just with ISIS, but in Russia and a lot of the other flare-ups in the world, that we're so weak at home that we don't have any credibility abroad right now. That's one of the reasons we're seeing so much turmoil around the world.
Hadley, then who steps in this power vacuum, if that's what you want to call it, if it's later proven the president did know upwards of a year ago that ISIS was a growing threat, so much of a threat, I believe, about a year ago, he was told al-Qaeda is anxious about these guys.
Well, there's no doubt in anyone's mind now that ISIS is a real security threat to Iraq, to the entire Middle Eastern region, and to the rest of the world. So Americans at home are understandably sitting at home today. I'm sure a very sad day for all Americans, especially for the family of Stephen Sutloff. Our thoughts and prayers go out to his family, thinking full of frustration with a president who seems to admit to us and to the rest of the world that he has no strategy. I thought that was a huge mistake on the president's behalf. And to answer your question, Neil, I don't know who fills that vacuum. He is our commander-in-chief, and he needs to rise to the occasion.
You know, Richard, the other argument is that the president's strategy is what we're seeing, to be very tentative and to be very measured and not to respond to each and every brutal episode that tragically shows up on tape. That would be, his people argue, overreacting. What do you say?
Well, the former guest, the former Undersecretary of State, said the president's been dithering. That's not quite right. The president has chosen not to pay a ransom on each captive, and so that's a choice, and we pay for that choice.
But does it lead to the impression he's dithering? But he even says in press remarks, we haven't come up with a strategy yet. Now, true, talking about ISIS in Syria, but it belied the point that maybe he doesn't have a strategy for ISIS, period.
That perception does exist, that he's dithering, and it worries people. But there are certain choice points that the president has made that aren't publicized, and they're kind of behind the scenes, one of which is to not have paid a ransom. But at any rate, moving forward, he has, as a perception and as an actual matter, I do believe he has to be more aggressive on this, and I think we're going to see that. And another quick comment I'd love to make is that I hope on social media the public doesn't share these videos because it plays into ISIS's strategy. I have a friend who taught James Foley as an undergrad, and it's just horrific for these families and their loved ones and people who know them to see these videos played out.
Oh, especially for Sutloff's mom, who last week led for her son. All right, so Steve, one of the other things I want, if you don't mind my crassly mentioning the markets, is that they kind of shrug their shoulder at these tragic developments, whether they come to expect them or see them. But I'm wondering if they do that to their detriment. In other words, while they're so focused on whether the Fed's going to start raising interest rates or whether you know, Ukraine could blow up in their face, that ISIS in particular does not seem to be among their main, you know, fears. Certainly a concern, but not a full-blown panic attack. What do you make of that?
I've had the same reaction that you have, of kind of confusion about why the market doesn't seem at all disturbed about these events that are going on outside the United States and the Middle East and elsewhere. You know, if you look back at what happened in 9/11, when you had the, you know, obviously this major terrorist attack on these soil, look what happened to the stock market. Look at what happened to the economy. My goodness, I mean, this would be a major blow to the economy if aside from the human toil, but in terms of our capitalist system functioning, if you have terrorists around the world that are blowing up schools and blowing up buildings and blowing up department stores. So I view this as not just a foreign policy issue, but it is an economic and financial issue as well, that we can function as a free market capitalist system if you've got these lunatics abroad that are trying to kill us.
And real quickly, Hadley, that we're unable to respond effectively, at least at this point.
That's right. You know, when we first saw that James Foley was executed, I imagine a lot of Americans thought how barbaric. Certainly the United States, such a strong exceptional country, the leaders of the world, we won't let this go unnoticed. And now to see a second video is very disheartening to Americans who are sitting at home wondering exactly what the response will be.
All right, we're keeping an eye on all of this. We'll update you at the end of the show where things stand right now. Stay with us.